Stand up, man. You're under arrest.
Why? What happened?
You're being detained. Stand up.
Detained for what? What's the reason you're saying detained?
I told you. Stand up.
Right? If someone called, say what they said. If there's a complaint, tell me what it is.
Man, you're making this hard. Show me your ID.
No. I'm asking for a supervisor.
What happens when a patrol officer tries to detain a calm black man in Bryant Park, demands ID, orders him to stand, and still won't say what call he's on or what crime he suspects? The answer isn't what you'd expect, because the cameras didn't just record a bad stop. They recorded a detention with no reason on the record. Quick check-in. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you're here for stories where power gets challenged with facts and receipts, hit like and subscribe. It helps this channel push back on the nonsense. Now here's what happened. It was lunch hour at Bryant Park. Crowded, loud, benches full. People eating, working, passing through. Nothing about the scene looked urgent. Anthony Gaines sat on a bench like anyone else. Calm, hands visible. No argument with anyone. No disturbance, just sitting. Officer Kyle Mercer walked up and went straight to control mode. No greeting, no explanation. He ordered Gaines to stand. Then he demanded an ID. Then he said Gaines was being detained. Gaines didn't stand. He stayed seated. Hands still visible, voice steady. He didn't give Mercer a reason to claim fear or suspicious movement. He kept it simple and procedural. He asked what the legal basis was for the detention. Mercer didn't answer that. He repeated the commands. That's when it got obvious to everyone around them. Mercer wanted compliance first. The reason could be invented later, or never said at all. Gaines asked again, still calm. What crime was being investigated? What specific facts created reasonable suspicion? Was he free to leave or not? Mercer kept dodging. No mention of a dispatch call. No mention of a complaint. No mention of a description. No explanation. Just the detention label and louder orders. People started paying attention. At first, bystanders did the usual. Quick glance. Back to their food. Nobody wants a front row seat to police drama, but Mercer's approach didn't match the situation. It was aggressive without context. It looked like a stop that ran on attitude, not facts. One person pulled out a phone, then another, then a third. You could see the moment the crowd decided this needed witnesses. Mercer noticed the phones. His body language tightened. He leaned harder into authority. He repeated the stand order like it was the whole point of the interaction. Gaines still didn't move. He kept his tone flat and professional. He asked Mercer to state the reason out loud. On camera, he asked for Mercer's name and badge number. He asked for a supervisor. This mattered a lot, because when someone stays calm and asks basic legal questions, the officer has two options: give a reason, or escalate without one. And with phones up, escalation gets expensive. Mercer chose the third option people hate most. He kept pushing, but he kept refusing to say why. He tried to frame Gaines as the problem, like the refusal to stand was the issue, not the missing justification. He acted like obedience was the law itself. Gaines didn't take the bait. He didn't argue about feelings. He didn't insult the officer. He didn't raise his voice. He stayed locked on the same point. Detention needs a stated reason. The crowd got closer, not crowding Mercer, just making sure the cameras had clean angles, faces, badge, distance, Gaines' hands, the whole scene. Mercer's control plan started collapsing in real time. He couldn't claim Gaines was threatening. Gaines never stood up, never reached into pockets, never moved his hands out of view. He couldn't claim chaos because Gaines wasn't creating any. The only tension came from Mercer's own pressure. So Mercer pushed again, harder, same demands, same refusal to explain. Gaines asked for the supervisor again. Mercer hesitated. You could feel it. That split second where he realized he'd built the stop on nothing, and now he had witnesses. Then Gaines made the reveal. He identified himself as Anthony Gaines, the chief of police. That hit Mercer like a wall. He didn't recognize him. Mercer was new. Gaines wasn't in uniform. He looked like a regular guy on a bench. That's the point. The stop wasn't based on who Gaines was. It was based on what Mercer assumed he was. Mercer's tone changed immediately. His posture changed. The sharpness disappeared. The detention language evaporated. Now he wanted to de-escalate. Now he wanted to end it clean. Now he wanted it to be a misunderstanding. And he ended the detention fast. No citation, no charge, no paperwork on the spot. No, here's the report number. Nothing. Just a quick exit. That was the loudest part of the whole encounter. Because if Mercer had a real reason, he would have said it. If Mercer had a real call, it would have been easy to name. If Mercer had reasonable suspicion, he could have explained it in 10 seconds and kept doing his job. Instead, the stop ended the moment the person on the bench became someone Mercer couldn't afford to bully. Gaines didn't grandstand. He didn't posture for the crowd. He kept it professional. He made it clear the issue wasn't ego. The issue was procedure. You can't detain people and refuse to say why, especially when you're being recorded. Bystanders kept filming after Mercer backed off. Smart. They captured the flip. The before and after. The part where the officer acted one way toward a black man on a bench, then switched up the second authority walked into the picture. And that clean timeline, plus Bodycam, set up what came next. Because the department couldn't ignore the basic question anymore. What triggered that stop? The video hit the internet the same day. Not because it was loud, because it was clean. A calm black man sat still with visible hands. A patrol officer walked up and jumped straight to commands. The officer said detention. The man asked for a legal basis. The officer never gave one. Phones came out. The officer got tighter. Then the man revealed he was the police chief. The officer ended it immediately. No ticket, no charge, no paperwork. That last part mattered more than people realized at first. No paperwork meant no official footprint. No footprint meant nobody could audit it later. That's how these encounters stay invisible. Except this time, the phones and the body cam made their own paperwork. By the next morning, the department couldn't pretend it was just a weird moment in a park. The city manager's office had calls. The Civilian Oversight Board had emails. Local reporters requested records. People wanted two simple things: the dispatch trigger and the stop report. The first review happened fast. It always does when the person involved sits at the top of the chain. Chief Gaines didn't run it like revenge. He ran it like a test. He ordered a standard internal review like any complaint would trigger. Body cam, CAD logs, radio traffic, supervisor notifications, paper trail, everything. And right away, something didn't line up. Investigators pulled Mercer's body cam footage and synced it with the time of day. Then they pulled the computer-aided dispatch logs for that area during that window. They also checked radio traffic and any unit-to-unit messages. No call matched, no complaint matched, no dispatch assignment matched. That didn't automatically mean Mercer had no reason. Officers can do proactive policing. They can do welfare checks. They can respond to something flagged by another unit. They can observe a specific violation. But if that's the case, they usually say it because they need it on the record. Mercer didn't. So the team went to the second thing: documentation. If Mercer truly detained Gaines, that wasn't a casual conversation. Detention triggers reporting requirements in most departments. Stop forms, field interview cards, at minimum a log entry, something that shows who got stopped and why. They searched the system. Nothing. No stop report under Gaines's name. No field interview entry. No memo. No supervisor note. No entry that even suggested Mercer had made contact and declared detention. That was the moment the review stopped being about one bad interaction and started being about process abuse. Because here's the trick with these stops. An officer can create a detention in real life, then delete it afterward by simply not documenting it. The person lived it, and the public saw it, but the department's databases act like it never happened. That's why this one blew up. It was a detention that tried to leave no trace, except the trace was already on the internet. The oversight team widened the scope. They didn't start with bias as a conclusion. They started with a question. Was Mercer skipping stop documentation as a habit? So they pulled Mercer's activity history, not just arrests, not just tickets. They looked at body cam activation patterns, GPS pings, and the gaps between calls. They found a repeating shape. Mercer had lots of short contacts that didn't turn into citations, arrests, or reports. That's not automatically wrong. Most police contacts don't end in enforcement, but the pattern got weird when they paired it with Bodycam. They saw Mercer initiating contact, giving commands, pushing for ID, sometimes using detention language, then ending the interaction with nothing written down. Then they noticed another thing. The stops ended faster when a bystander filmed, or when the person being stopped knew how to ask the right questions without getting emotional. That wasn't proof by itself, but it was a flag, a big one. So investigators sampled more footage. Different days, different neighborhoods. Similar approach. They also compared the demographics from the few contacts that did get documented versus the contacts that didn't. The department had enough data to see the imbalance even with missing reports. The imbalance pointed in one direction. More black people showed up in the undocumented contact footage than in Mercer's official stop data. That meant the reporting system wasn't just incomplete, it was misleading. The oversight team brought supervisors into the room next. They asked basic questions. Who trained Mercer? Who signed off on his field activity? Who reviewed his body cam? Who was checking for stop reports? Who was auditing detain and release encounters? Supervisors gave the usual answers. They said they trusted officers to use discretion. They said they couldn't watch every minute of footage. They said paperwork focused on arrests and citations. That explanation didn't hold up once the team laid the timeline out. Mercer declared detention in public with no stated basis, then produced no documentation. That wasn't a paperwork issue. That was a legal exposure issue. Detentions require a reason. If he couldn't name it, he shouldn't have done it. If he did it, he had to document it. The department placed Mercer on administrative leave while the investigation continued. That step wasn't optional. The case had body cam. It had multiple public recordings. It had a missing dispatch trigger. It had a missing stop report. It had a pattern forming behind it. Then the older complaints started coming back. Once people saw Mercer's name in the news coverage, past complainants recognized it. Some had stopped filing because nothing happened the first time. Others had never filed because they assumed it would be pointless. Now they had a reason to try again. The oversight unit reopened files that had been closed as unfounded or inconclusive. They pulled footage tied to dates people had listed. They checked whether stop reports existed. They checked if the reasons on paper matched what Mercer said on camera. And the same problem kept showing up. Vague justifications spoken loosely in the moment, then no documentation, or documentation that didn't match the body cam. By the end of the second week, the department had more than a viral video. They had a stack of incidents that all relied on the same tactic. Control first, explanation later, paperwork never. And that's when the case moved from internal embarrassment to formal accountability. Once the oversight team had the Bryant Park footage synced with body cam and dispatch logs, they stopped treating it like a PR issue. They treated it like a compliance failure with a human face. They built the timeline the boring way, minute by minute. They matched Mercer's body cam timestamps to the CAD system. They checked radio traffic. They pulled supervisor logs. They looked for any trigger that could justify Mercer walking up and declaring detention. They found none. No dispatch call. No be on the lookout. No complaint. No park security request. Nothing that explained why Mercer picked that bench and went straight to stand-up Idaho detained. Then, they stacked the older encounters next to it. Same pattern kept showing up. Mercer approached. He controlled the pace. He demanded ID early. He used detention language loosely. He avoided naming a specific violation. He ended the contact abruptly when someone filmed, or when the person stayed calm and asked for the legal basis. The missing paperwork connected everything. Investigators didn't just accuse him of bias. They proved the operational trick. Mercer created real-world detentions and then erased them from the system by not documenting them. That meant supervisors couldn't review what they couldn't see. It also meant the department's public-facing stop data stayed clean while people still got stopped. And that's exactly why the case survived review. Because it wasn't opinion. It was records. Or the lack of them. The department put Mercer through the formal process. Not a quick firing to satisfy the internet. They gave him a chance to explain. They gave him representation. They held hearings. They compared his statements to the video. They compared his reasons to what he actually said in the moment. He couldn't square it. If he claimed he had reasonable suspicion, the footage didn't show him naming it. If he claimed he acted on a call, the dispatch system didn't back him up. If he claimed it was a simple conversation, his own body cam caught him calling it a detention and issuing orders. That's the corner he backed himself into. Cameras don't care about excuses made later. The reopened complaints made it worse. People came forward with dates, locations, and the same story structure. Mercer rolled up, got demanding fast, then left without writing anything down. Some complainants had names of witnesses. Some had partial recordings. Some had nothing except a memory and a time window. Oversight used that to pull body cam segments and GPS pings. They didn't need every complainant to have video. They just needed enough examples to show it wasn't an accident. They got enough. The department kept Mercer on leave while they finished the review. Then, they terminated him after the evidence held up through the final decision process. That outcome didn't happen because the man on the bench turned out to be the chief. It happened because Mercer created a clean record of himself, doing the thing he wasn't supposed to do, and he did it in the worst possible place, in public, in daylight, during lunch hour, with 10 phones pointed at him. Chief Gaines handled the aftermath carefully. He didn't act like the hero. He didn't tour the news stations. He didn't turn it into a victory lap. He treated it like what it was, proof that the department had a blind spot, big enough for one officer to hide a pattern inside it. So they tightened the system. They changed detention documentation rules, so officers couldn't play games with language. If an officer restricted someone's movement, even briefly, it triggered a required entry. No entry meant a problem. They added supervisory checks. If an officer initiated multiple stops with no documentation, supervisors had to review body cam and explain why the stop reports were missing. They built audits into the workflow. Not random once a year, regular, predictable. Enough that officers knew the department would actually look. They clarified the standard for asking for ID. Not every contact justified it. They trained officers to state the reason early and clearly, not after the fact. They reinforced body cam expectations. If an officer started a contact and the camera wasn't running, that became its own issue. No more selective recording, and they made sure the oversight unit got automatic access to certain triggers. Repeated short stops with no paperwork. Repeated contacts ending right after bystanders started filming. Those patterns went to review without needing a viral video to force it. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Terminating one officer doesn't fix the system. Closing the loophole does. A few months later, Bryant Park stayed Bryant Park. Busy lunches, people on benches, tourists with maps, normal life. But inside the department, that one bench stop changed how detentions got tracked. It forced the agency to admit something uncomfortable. If you don't require documentation, you don't have accountability. You have vibes and excuses. And if you're watching this thinking it couldn't happen to you, ask yourself something simple. If a cop can't clearly say why you're being detained, how long do you think they'll keep trying anyway if nobody's recording? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have stayed seated like Gaines did, hands visible, calm, procedural? Or would you have stood up just to make it end faster? Share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more real-world accountability stories told straight, hit subscribe and stick around.
Evening. What's going on tonight? What are you doing near this car?
Getting coffee. Took a minute in the lot. What's the reason for the contact?
I need to see your driver's license.
State the legal basis.
Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Who are you meeting?
I'm not answering extra questions without a reason.
You're being evasive. Turn
My
around.
hands are visible. You have my ID. Say the reason.
What happened when a patrol officer decided a black internal affairs chief looked suspicious for sitting in his own car with a coffee and kept escalating even after learning who he was? It didn't end with an awkward apology. Where are you watching from? Drop your state or country in the comments. And if you like stories where somebody tries a power move and the footage forces consequences, hit like and subscribe. You'll want the next part because this officer didn't just overstep, he documented it. Now, rewind. Briar Ridge PD had been trying to look clean lately. New statements, new training memos, supervisors reminding everybody about professionalism. The public heard it and rolled their eyes. Inside the department, some officers treated it like noise. Internal Affairs didn't treat it like noise. Deputy Chief Malcolm Brooks ran IA, black man, mid-40s, not flashy, not a speech guy. He was a paperwork and proof guy. The kind of supervisor who didn't need to yell because he could pull the footage and line it up with the policy. That evening, Brooks wasn't running an operation. No sting, no secret meeting. He was off duty in the practical way high-ranking cops are off duty, meaning his phone still buzzed and his mind didn't fully shut off. He grabbed a coffee and parked in a gas station lot for a few minutes, sitting, checking messages, decompressing. Officer Nolan Kincaid saw the car and decided it didn't belong. Kincaid had a reputation on patrol, loud confidence, quick to treat questions like disrespect, the type who believed control came from pressure. He also had a history of complaints that never landed hard enough to stick, the kind of paper trail that always had "not sustained" stamped on it somewhere. That's why this night mattered. Not because it was dramatic, because it was normal. And normal is where people show who they are. Kincaid pulled in behind Brooks's sedan and hit him with the spotlight. He didn't start with a simple greeting. He started with authority, ID request. What are you doing here? Why are you sitting here? The vibe wasn't curiosity, it was accusation. Brooks didn't match energy. He didn't try to big rank him yet. He gave ID. He kept his hands where they could be seen. He asked a basic question back. What was the reason for the contact? Kincaid didn't answer cleanly. He circled around it. He implied the car looked suspicious. He implied Brooks was being difficult for even asking. Brooks noticed Kincaid's stance. Kincaid kept angling his body, like he wanted the Bodycam audio to be messy, like he wanted the record to be unclear. Brooks made it clear without drama that the interaction was being recorded beyond just the Bodycam, dash cam, lot cameras, everything. That should have cooled Kincaid down. A smart officer hears multiple cameras and stays professional. Kincaid doubled down. And that's the point where Brooks finally did identify himself properly. Name, badge, title. Still calm. Still controlled. Kincaid processed it. You could feel it in the pause. Then he did something that told you everything you needed to know. He didn't reset. He didn't apologize. He didn't step back. He got more aggressive. That little pause after Kincaid read the ID, it didn't soften him. It hardened him. He looked at Malcolm Brooks like Brooks had personally insulted him by existing in that seat. Then he started talking the way some cops talk when they think they've been challenged. Not about the parking lot. Not about safety. About control. Kincaid told Brooks the stop wasn't over. He told him to step out of the vehicle. He framed it like Brooks was delaying on purpose. Like asking for a reason was arguing. Brooks kept it tight, hands visible, calm tone. He repeated the same point. He'd comply with lawful orders, and he wanted the legal basis stated clearly. Simple, professional. The kind of answer that gives an officer a clean exit if the officer wants one. Kincaid didn't take the exit. He shifted into contempt. He started taking shots at internal affairs as a concept. He painted IA as people who sit behind desks and ruin careers. He made it personal by making it about Brooks's position, like Brooks didn't earn it, like it was a gimmick. And then he did the thing officers do when they want to manufacture justification. He started fishing. He said he needed to check the car. He implied he had reasons. He leaned in toward the window like he was sniffing for something that wasn't there. He asked questions that weren't connected to anything. Where Brooks was coming from, where he was going, why he was parked, who he was meeting, why he was in this part of the city. He wasn't investigating a violation. He was looking for a hook. Brooks didn't get dragged into the trap. He didn't answer extra. He didn't volunteer a story Kincaid could twist. He stayed focused on process. He asked if he was being detained or free to go. He asked for the specific violation. He reminded Kincaid again that the interaction was being recorded by more than one camera. That reminder hit Kincaid the wrong way. You could almost feel it. Kincaid stepped a half pace back, then repositioned so his body blocked the cleanest angle of his own camera. He also raised his voice, not to communicate, but to dominate. He wanted it loud. He wanted it messy. He wanted the record to sound like compliance problem instead of officer problem. Brooks stayed even. Then Kincaid made the next move in the chess game. He tried to turn Brooks into a suspect with labels. He described Brooks as non-compliant. He described him as evasive. He described him as hostile without Brooks being hostile at all. That kind of language matters because it's the foundation officers use later to justify everything else. Brooks didn't argue the labels. He challenged the facts underneath them. He asked Kincaid to repeat on camera what order he was giving and what law it was tied to. He asked if a supervisor was being called. He kept giving Kincaid the same off-ramp, say the reason, do this correctly, end it. Kincaid didn't want to correct. He wanted submission. So he escalated again. He threatened removal from the car. He hinted at cuffs. He used that tone that says, I can do whatever I want, and you can't stop it. Brooks didn't flinch. He didn't dare him either. He just made it clear he wasn't consenting to any search, and that if Kincaid believed he had legal cause, he needed to articulate it and be ready to explain it to command staff. Brooks wasn't flexing. He was forecasting. That's when Kincaid's taunts got uglier. He didn't use slurs. He didn't need to. He went for that coded disrespect some people use when they want to put a black man in his place without saying it outright. He implied Brooks was only in that position because the city wanted a certain image. He implied Brooks didn't understand real policing. He implied oversight was the enemy, and Brooks was the face of it. And here's what's crazy. Kincaid said all of this after he knew exactly who Malcolm Brooks was. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. Brooks gave him one more clean warning, not a threat, a boundary. He told him the conduct was crossing into retaliation and harassment. He told him the record would reflect it. He told him to call a supervisor to the scene. Kincaid answered by going to the radio. He called for backup, and he painted Brooks as the problem. He didn't say, I've got the IA chief here, and I need a supervisor for transparency. He said the kind of thing that makes the responding units show up keyed up. He described a suspicious vehicle. He described a driver refusing commands. He framed it like officer safety was at risk. All while Brooks sat there, still, hands visible, coffee untouched, acting like a professional adult. Kincaid wanted the next officers to arrive already leaning his way. That's how these things get dangerous without anyone throwing a punch. Narrative first, reality second. Brooks didn't panic. He did something subtle instead. He positioned his phone so it would catch audio clearly, not to go viral. To preserve a clean record in case someone tried to summarize the stop later. Now Kincaid had a problem. He couldn't intimidate Brooks into silence. He couldn't bluff Brooks into consent. And he couldn't pretend cameras weren't watching. So he made it personal again. He leaned closer to the window and pushed the same demand out of the vehicle, like volume could substitute for legality. Headlights appeared at the edge of the lot a moment later. Another unit coming in hot. Kincaid straightened up like he was about to perform. Brooks stayed calm because he already knew the truth. Once other officers arrived, Kincaid wouldn't just be dealing with a driver. He'd be dealing with witnesses. The second unit hit the lot with urgency. Tires slowed hard, doors opened fast. Kincaid turned into it like he'd been waiting for an audience. He started talking before anyone even got close enough to see Malcolm Brooks's face clearly, and he fed his version first. Drivers being difficult. Drivers refusing orders. Drivers making it unsafe. That's how these things go when someone's trying to control the record. Build the story early. Let everyone else inherit it. Sergeant Mateo Alvarez stepped out and did one quick scan. Cruiser placement, body language, hands, distance. Then his eyes landed on the driver. He recognized Brooks immediately. Alvarez didn't show panic, but his face tightened. He knew what this was, not a normal stop, not a misunderstanding, a career event. Officer Tessa Reed, the rookie, hovered behind Alvarez and followed his gaze. She recognized Brooks from department briefings and staff emails. Her posture changed on the spot, like her brain was trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she'd been taught. Kincaid kept going anyway. He didn't reset his tone, he didn't back off. He acted like the badge on his chest gave him permission to ignore rank, process, and basic sense. He told Alvarez, loud, that Brooks was refusing to exit the vehicle and that he needed compliance. Alvarez didn't mirror the energy. He did the supervisor thing. He asked for the reason for the stop and the justification for the escalation. Clean questions, the kind that forces an officer to either articulate facts or admit he's running on ego. Kincaid didn't have facts. He had attitude. He tried to turn it into a department culture argument. He started complaining about oversight, about how IA always second-guessed patrol, about how certain people in leadership didn't respect street cops. He said it like it excused what he was doing in that moment. That was the slip. Because once he admitted his real focus wasn't the parking lot, it wasn't suspicious behavior, it wasn't safety, it was resentment toward internal affairs. The stop stopped being a stop. It became retaliation on camera. Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look impressed. He stayed steady and did something most people don't do under pressure. He kept it procedural. He told Alvarez he wanted the stop documented exactly as it was happening, with no side explanations and no private, let me tell you what really happened huddles. He also made it clear he wasn't consenting to any search, and that Kincaid still hadn't stated a lawful reason for the orders he'd been giving. Reed looked between them like she was watching a rulebook get tested in real time. Kincaid didn't like Brooks directing anything. You could see it hit his pride. He tried to reclaim control by stepping closer to the driver's window again. Alvarez cut that off. He ordered Kincaid to step back and give space. Not a suggestion. A supervisor order. Alvarez's voice came out controlled, but firm enough that Reed straightened up immediately. Kincaid hesitated. Kincaid? That tiny hesitation mattered too. It showed he was deciding whether to obey. He obeyed, but he made sure everyone saw his irritation. He kept talking, still trying to label Brooks as difficult, still trying to preserve his story. He wanted Alvarez to buy it. He wanted Reed to absorb it. He wanted the department's default loyalty to carry him over the gap, where his justification should have been. Alvarez didn't buy it. He asked again for the specific reason for the contact. Specific. Not vibes, not looked suspicious. A real reason. Kincaid tried to dodge again, and it landed flat, because now there were 3 cameras minimum on the scene. His own body cam, his dash cam, the store's lot cameras. Maybe Brooks' phone too. Alvarez knew that. Brooks knew that. Kincaid knew it most of all. Brooks finally gave Alvarez the key detail he'd been holding back. He identified himself clearly as the internal affairs chief and said he'd been sitting there drinking coffee, doing nothing illegal, when Kincaid decided to turn it into a confrontation. Alvarez took one more look at Kincaid. The look supervisors give when they realize they're going to be writing a lot of paperwork for someone who didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Then Alvarez made the call that changed the whole tone. He requested a command lieutenant to respond. Immediate. On scene. No delay. He also told Reed to stay present and observe. No wandering off, no go handle traffic. He wanted witnesses locked in. Kincaid tried one last angle. He acted like oversight was interfering with policing, like the department was handcuffing him, like he was the victim of leadership. Brooks didn't argue the speech. He didn't need to. He ended the confrontation the way an IA chief ends things, when someone's digging their own hole. He told Kincaid, calm and clear, that accountability wasn't a personal attack and it wasn't optional. It came with the job. And the record was going to reflect everything Kincaid had chosen to do after learning exactly who he was talking to. Kincaid went quiet for the first time. Not because he suddenly understood professionalism, because he finally understood consequences. The command lieutenant arrived and didn't waste time. He separated people. He asked for the reason for contact. He got the same vague answer Kincaid had been dodging with all night. Then the lieutenant did the one thing that tells you a supervisor knows a disaster when he sees one. He ended it. He told Brooks he was free to go. He told Alvarez to stay put and start the documentation. He told Kincaid to stop talking and keep his camera on. Kincaid tried to squeeze in a last narrative push on the spot. He wanted the lieutenant to validate him. He wanted someone higher up to say he did the right thing. That didn't happen. The lieutenant sent Kincaid back to the station, not to keep working, but to wait. That difference matters. Cops know it. Kincaid knew it too. Brooks left the lot like any other driver would. No victory lap, no speech, no theatrics. The coffee sat untouched the whole time. The point wasn't the coffee anyway. The point was the officer who chose to turn a normal moment into a power game. And now the cameras had a full record of every choice he made. Back at headquarters, the process started fast, the way it only starts fast when leadership knows the evidence is bad. Brooks didn't run the investigation himself. That's what people assume IA chiefs do. In reality, good departments avoid conflicts like that. Brooks triggered the process and stepped back from the lead role. He routed it to professional standards with oversight from command staff, clean chain, clean paperwork, no excuses later. First move, preservation. They locked the body cam footage before anyone could misplace it. Same for dash cam. Same for radio traffic, CAD notes, dispatch audio, the timestamps, the call history. They pulled the gas station surveillance too, because Kincaid's whole stop leaned on the idea that he had reason to treat Brooks like a problem. Lot footage doesn't care about vibes. It shows what happened. Second move, duty status. By the next shift, Kincaid sat on administrative leave. He still got pay at first. That's how it works in most places. Leave doesn't mean innocence. It means the department needed him off the street while they reviewed a stop that already looked like misconduct on its face. Third move, statements. Alvarez wrote his report the same night. He didn't dress it up. He described what he saw, what he heard, and how Kincaid behaved after learning who Brooks was. Reed wrote hers too. That rookie report mattered more than people think. Rookies don't have old loyalties yet. They describe what happened the way training taught them. Straight, unpolished, hard to spin. Kincaid's report hit the system later and read like a script. Lots of labels, few facts. A lot of uncooperative without clean articulation of why the contact escalated in the first place. Then the interviews came. Kincaid showed up with a union rep because of course he did. He leaned into the classic defenses. He framed it as officer safety. He framed Brooks as argumentative. He framed the situation as a misunderstanding. That strategy works when the record has gaps. This record didn't. The footage showed Brooks staying calm, hands visible, minimal movement, clear questions, no threats, no sudden moves, no behavior that justified the tone Kincaid used. The footage also showed Kincaid switching gears the moment he recognized the name. That was the part that killed him. Not because he made a bad call at first, because he doubled down after he knew. That's not confusion, that's intent. Professional standards pulled Kincaid's history next, not to punish him for old stuff, to test pattern. They looked at his past stops flagged as uncooperative subject. They compared those labels to video. They looked for the same pressure tactics, same narrative building, same habit of escalating, then writing like the driver forced his hand. They found enough to make leadership nervous. Not nervous about Kincaid, nervous about what it said the department had tolerated. Inside the building, the mood split fast. Some officers were furious at Kincaid for embarrassing them, not because they loved internal affairs, because he dragged the whole department into a mess that didn't need to exist. He made everyone look like they couldn't control their own people. Others got quiet. They'd seen Kincaid push people around before. They'd heard the way he talked when he thought nobody important was listening. This time, somebody important was listening. With cameras. The rookies watched it like a lesson they didn't ask for. Reed especially. She saw how fast an officer could turn authority into bullying and still believe he was the victim. That sticks with you. Then it hit outside the building. The footage didn't stay internal. It never does anymore. A public records request came in. Local media caught wind of it. The city reviewed what could be released. They released enough. People saw the escalation, not as an isolated clip, but as a timeline. Start to finish. The officer's posture. The radio call. The way he tried to set the story before backup arrived. The way he kept pushing after he learned the man in the driver's seat ran internal affairs. And the public reaction wasn't confusion. It was recognition. A lot of people said the same thing in different words. If he acted like that toward the IA chief, imagine how he acted toward regular civilians who didn't know policy and didn't have rank. That's what damaged trust. Not the traffic stop, the mindset behind it. The department had to respond with something stronger than a memo. So they moved the case to a disciplinary board review with command staff and city HR present. They also looped in the city attorney because Kincaid's behavior raised legal risk, retaliation, abuse of authority, false statements, the kind of stuff that turns into lawsuits and settlements fast. Kincaid still tried to fight it. He filed a complaint against Brooks. He claimed Brooks provoked him. He framed it as leadership harassment. He wanted counterpressure. He wanted the process to slow down. It didn't slow down. The evidence ran too clean. The final findings hit in plain language. They substantiated harassment and unprofessional conduct. They substantiated insubordination because he ignored clear supervisory direction and kept escalating. They substantiated misuse of authority because the stop had no solid legal foundation once you stripped away the labels. They nailed him on report credibility too because his written narrative didn't match the video record. That's where departments usually stop. Suspension, demotion, quiet transfer. This time they didn't. They terminated him. He walked out without his badge. No second chance. No resignation in good standing. The department also forwarded the case to the state certification board. That step matters. It's what blocks the usual move where a fired cop just hops to the next town and gets rehired. Kincaid didn't just lose his job. He lost his path. After that, Briar Ridge had to do something internal that actually changed behavior, not just optics. They wrote new policy language targeting retaliatory contacts. They tightened rules around suspicious vehicle encounters, requiring clear articulation tied to observable facts. They added supervisor response requirements when a stop involved department personnel or when an officer claimed uncooperative without a clear lawful basis. They expanded body cam audits, So complaint categories triggered automatic review, not random spot checks. They also did something quietly powerful. They trained supervisors to step in early, the way Alvarez did, and they backed them up for it. No punishing a sergeant for correcting a problem officer. No leaving supervisors hanging while the union screams. Brooks kept doing his job. People expected him to gloat. He didn't. He treated it like any other case. Facts, record, outcome. That pissed off the thin blue ego crowd more than any speech would have. Because calm accountability is hard to argue with, and Reed, she went back to patrol with a different kind of confidence. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from seeing the system work when it chooses to. Here's the lesson, and you've probably already got it. Power doesn't expose itself when everything's easy. It exposes itself when someone hears no and decides to punish the person who said it. Kincaid tried to punish a man for asking for lawful reasons. He kept going after he knew that man ran internal affairs. Cameras didn't create the misconduct. They just removed the escape hatch. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if you were Alvarez walking into that lot? Would you have checked your officer right there? Or would you have tried to smooth it over and handle it later? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more true-to-life stories, where accountability actually lands and the footage forces consequences like the video, share it with somebody who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
All right, gentlemen, what's going on? I need to see your IDs.
What's the call for?
We got a call about two guys hanging around out here. That's why I'm talking to you.
Okay. What is suspicious about just standing in the parking lot?
Stop with the legal talk. Do you have ID or not?
Yes, but there's no legal reason I'm providing it.
What happens when two undercover detectives stage in a shopping plaza parking lot for an active operation and uniformed patrol shows up, demanding IDs like they've caught suspects in the act? The answer isn't what most people think. Because the cameras didn't just capture a tense stop. They captured officers trying to build a detention out of nothing. And they did it in public. Quick check-in. Where are you watching from today? Country, state, whatever. Drop it in the comments. And if you watch stories where power gets challenged with facts, hit like and subscribe because this one shows how fast a simple call turns into real damage. Now rewind. It was mid-morning at a busy shopping plaza. Not rush hour, not dead either. People drifted in and out, coffee cups, grocery bags, a delivery truck backing up and beeping like it owned the place. And in the middle of that normal noise, two undercover detectives used the parking lot as a staging point. Jordan Price and Cameron Reed weren't shopping. They weren't loitering for fun. They were working. They stayed on foot, not sitting in a car, because the sightlines mattered. Entrances mattered. Timing mattered. They needed angles. They needed to watch who came out of which doorway and how long someone lingered before moving. Their team had a synchronized approach plan, not sloppy, not rushed, tight. But to anyone who didn't know what they were doing, it looked like two men staying in the same area longer than most shoppers would, and that's all it took. A plaza employee noticed them and decided it felt wrong. Not illegal, not threatening, just wrong. The employee didn't walk over and ask if they needed help, didn't check if they worked there, didn't get a manager, just called police with a vague report that two men had been hanging around the lot too long. That kind of call shouldn't be a big deal, not by itself. It's a check-in call at most. But Officer Dylan Mercer didn't treat it that way. He arrived like he expected a crime in progress. He brought his partner, Officer Paige Nolan, and both of them moved with that stiff posture cops get when they've already decided what they're looking at. They locked eyes on Jordan and Cameron fast. No greeting, no calm questions, no basic explanation. They went straight to control. Mercer demanded identification right away and acted like refusal meant guilt. Nolan backed him up and held position like they were containing a threat. Jordan and Cameron didn't get loud. They didn't get disrespectful. They stayed calm and did what trained people do when the situation starts sliding into nonsense. They asked for specifics. They asked what crime the officers believed had happened. They asked what facts created suspicion. They asked the one question that forces clarity. Were they detained or free to go? Mercer didn't answer cleanly. He just kept pushing the ID demand and tightening the situation. Nolan followed his lead, repeating the same command, same tone, same pressure. And right there, you could see the whole problem. A vague call comes in. No allegation of theft, no weapon, no trespass notice, no threats, no report of an assault. Nothing. Just a feeling that two men stayed too long. That's not a lawful detention by itself. That's not reasonable suspicion. That's not even close. But Mercer acted like it was enough. He kept them in the open, in the middle of the lot, not off to the side, not a quick conversation. He held the line and made it a scene. Minutes started stacking up, and every minute mattered. Jordan and Cameron's operation depended on the plaza staying boring. The target needed to keep thinking everything was normal. No uniforms, no flashing lights, no cluster of people watching, no tension in the air. But now the environment changed. Shoppers noticed two officers posted up on two men. People slowed down, heads turned. Phones came out. That's how it always goes. Someone sees the posture, the stance, the tone, and they know it's not just a friendly chat. So they film. Not because they're activists, because they don't trust what happens when nobody records it. Jordan and Cameron stayed controlled anyway. They didn't try to walk off and create an excuse for escalation. They didn't argue in circles. They kept pressing the same clean questions over and over because those questions expose whether the stop has any real foundation. Mercer still refused to give a clear legal reason. He kept treating the demand for ID like it was the reason. And that's backwards. A demand isn't justification. A badge isn't a blank check. Cameron scanned the plaza the way he couldn't help doing. He tracked entrances with his eyes. He watched movement patterns. He could feel the operation slipping. Jordan stayed focused on the officers. He watched Mercer's face every time he asked for the facts. He watched Nolan mirror Mercer's posture like she was afraid to break rank, even if the stop didn't make sense. And the pressure tactics kept coming. Mercer used the voice cops use when they want compliance without explanation. Nolan reinforced it. They tried to box Jordan and Cameron into a choice. Comply now, or get treated like criminals. But Jordan and Cameron didn't give them the reaction they wanted. No sudden movements, no insults, no ego battle. Just calm. Just questions. Just boundaries. And that made Mercer worse. Because some officers hate one thing more than refusal. They hate calm refusal. That's when bystanders got closer, not too close. Close enough to capture audio. Close enough to catch the body language. Close enough that Mercer couldn't pretend this was private. Across the lot, the actual target's pattern shifted. Nothing dramatic, just enough. A pause, a glance, a change in route. Small changes, big meaning. Jordan's team wasn't ready yet. The timing broke, the window narrowed, and Mercer still couldn't say what law had been violated. He kept holding them anyway. By then, this wasn't just an annoying stop. It was interference. It was a public detention built on a vague call and a power trip, happening in the exact place Jordan and Cameron needed to stay invisible. Mercer kept the stop going even after it was obvious Jordan and Cameron weren't doing anything criminal. He still demanded identification and still wouldn't give a clear reason for holding them. Nolan stayed with him and backed every step, like she didn't want to be the one who questioned it. The longer it dragged, the more visible it got. People started filming because it looked like a detention, not a quick check. One of the clearest angles came from a man named Marcus, who sat in a wheelchair near the coffee spot. He didn't crowd anybody. He just held his phone steady and recorded the whole thing from a safe distance, including Mercer's tone and the way the officers kept Jordan and Cameron in place without explaining the legal basis. That's what killed the operation. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the disruption. Uniforms in the open, voices raised, bystanders stopping to watch. The target noticed the shift in the parking lot and adjusted. Nothing dramatic, no running. Just a change in movement that told Jordan and Cameron the window was closing. Cameron tried to keep eyes on the entrances without looking obvious. Jordan stayed focused on the officers because Mercer kept pressing like he wanted a reaction he could use. Jordan and Cameron didn't give him one. They stayed controlled and kept asking the same practical questions. What specific facts led to this? What crime was suspected? And whether they were being detained or free to leave? Mercer avoided answering straight. He treated the ID demand like it was the reason, not the result. Then Eric Dalton arrived. Dalton was plainclothes, but he carried himself like supervision. He didn't come in smiling, he didn't chat. He went straight to Mercer and made him explain out loud why he was detaining two men over a vague call from a Plaza employee. Mercer tried to justify it with general language about suspicious behavior and safety. Dalton didn't accept that. He pushed for actual observations that matched a lawful standard. What did they do? What did they touch? Who did they approach? What threat did anyone report? What crime did Mercer think was happening? Mercer couldn't answer with anything solid. And when Dalton forced him to stop circling, Mercer finally said the quiet part in a way the cameras could catch. The main issue was that Jordan and Cameron had been in the lot for too long. That was the turning point. Because once that became the stated basis, the detention fell apart. Staying in a parking lot isn't a crime. Standing around longer than a shopper isn't a crime. And without specific facts tied to an actual offense, the stop had no legs. Dalton made Mercer end it immediately. Nolan backed off once Dalton stepped in. Mercer's posture changed fast because now he had oversight standing right there and multiple cameras pointed at him. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't argue for the sake of it. He said one clean thing that landed because it was true. Next time, bring facts, not a feeling. But the mission still didn't recover. By the time Jordan and Cameron got clear, the target had already changed course and disappeared into the flow of the plaza. Their team couldn't complete the approach because the environment was blown. The opportunity closed while Mercer was busy trying to turn a vague call into a detention. And that's what made this bigger than a bad stop. Plaza security cameras had the wide view. Bodycams had the officer perspective. Marcus's video had the clearest outside angle of the detention and the pressure. 3 sources, same story. Officers held 2 calm men, demanded ID repeatedly, and couldn't articulate a real legal basis until supervision arrived. That footage didn't just look bad. It created a record that people couldn't ignore. Jordan and Cameron didn't get to reset the mission after the detention ended. That chance didn't exist. The target had already changed behavior, blended into the normal plaza flow, and disappeared before the team could finish the approach. Jordan's unit ran the post checks anyway. They checked exits, they checked cameras their team had access to. They checked timing against radio logs. The results stayed the same. The operation got blown because a vague call turned into a public detention with no real legal basis. That alone would have been bad. But it didn't stay inside the department. The footage made sure of that. Within days, the recordings started circulating. Not just one clip, multiple angles. The plaza's security view showed how long Mercer and Nolan held Jordan and Cameron in place. The Bodycam audio captured the repeated ID demands and the way Mercer dodged the basic question of what specific crime he suspected. Marcus's wheelchair angle showed the public impact. Officers pressing 2 calm men while shoppers watched. And once video like that exists, people start asking the questions that matter. Who called this in, and what did they actually report? Why did the officers treat it like a crime in progress with no described crime? Why didn't they clearly state whether it was a voluntary contact or detention? Why did it take a plainclothes supervisor showing up for anyone to start talking about actual legal standards. Internal leadership couldn't brush it off as just a misunderstanding. The mission was real, the interference was real, and the record was too clean. Then it escalated again for a separate reason. The operation had federal coordination connected to it. That detail didn't hit the public right away, but it hit the right desks fast. Once the stop got flagged as interference with federal work, the review stopped being optional. Investigators requested everything. Plaza security footage, full body cam files, dispatch audio, CAD notes, unit arrival times, supervisor communications, any prior calls from that Plaza employee, any pattern of similar lingering stops by Mercer and Nolan. They didn't just look at the moment. They looked at behavior. And Mercer's problem was simple. He couldn't articulate reasonable suspicion beyond. They were there too long. That sounded weak on the street, and it sounded worse on paper. Nolan didn't escape it either. She reinforced the detention. She didn't correct it. She didn't step in to narrow it. She stayed aligned with Mercer's decisions, and the cameras caught that too. The department tried to contain it at first. Standard move, quiet review, quiet meetings, quiet statements. That didn't work. Because the case wasn't just about optics. It was about unlawful detention and mistreatment under color of authority, plus operational interference. The facts didn't support the officers. The evidence didn't leave room for creative storytelling. The city suspended both officers while the investigation ran. Mercer tried to defend the stop as proactive policing. Nolan tried to frame it as following procedure. Investigators kept dragging it back to the same question. What specific facts justified detaining two men who were not committing any reported crime? They never produced a clean answer. And once that happened, the next steps were predictable. Mercer lost his job. Nolan lost hers too. The department couldn't keep them after the footage and the findings, not without admitting that this was normal practice. They didn't want to admit that. Jordan and Cameron didn't treat the firings like a victory. They treated them like a consequence. They still had to explain to their own chain of command why the mission failed. They still had to document how the stop disrupted timing and changed the environment. They still had to sit in meetings where people pretended it was all unfortunate instead of avoidable. Then came the lawsuit, not a small one. The city faced real exposure because the detention happened in public, lacked articulable reasonable suspicion, and got backed up by multiple recordings. The claim didn't hinge on one person's memory. It hinged on video and audio. The city didn't want a trial with those clips playing on a screen for a week. So it ended in a $5 million outcome, tied to the unlawful detention and mistreatment, plus the damage caused by the interference. The payout hit budgets. It hit reputations. It forced the city to choose between denial and reform. They chose reform, but only after it cost them. Policy changes rolled out after that. Dispatch updated how they handled vague, suspicious person calls. Officers now had to document specific observed behavior before turning a contact into a detention. Supervisors got clearer authority and responsibility to end weak stops early, not after they'd already created a mess. Bodycam review rules tightened. Training got mandatory with real scenarios focused on reasonable suspicion, detention limits, and how to separate discomfort from criminal indicators. And the plaza itself changed too. Management adjusted how employees reported concerns. They emphasized descriptions and actual behaviors, not general fear. The employee who made the original call didn't control what happened after, but that call started the chain, and the plaza learned what vague reporting can trigger when officers show up ready to dominate instead of assess. Months later, the lot looked like it always did: cars, coffee, people walking with bags. But the department didn't look the same. Jordan and Cameron went back to work because that's what they did. They kept doing operations, they kept planning staging points, they kept watching the same kinds of entrances. But they also carried that lesson with them. It only takes one patrol decision, one ego moment, 1 weak call handled badly to burn months of work and put everyone at risk. And for anyone watching this, here's the point. When officers can't explain why they're detaining someone, that's not a small issue. That's the whole issue. The Constitution isn't based on vibes. It's based on facts. If an officer can't state the facts, they don't get to take your freedom just to check. Now tell me this. If you were standing there, filming like Marcus did, what would you focus on to make sure the truth couldn't get twisted later? And if you've ever been stopped on a vague excuse, did the officer actually explain the reason? Or did they just repeat commands until you gave up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who thinks it's no big deal to hold people for nothing. And subscribe if you want more real, grounded stories where accountability actually shows up.
Receipt. You need to show me your receipt before you leave.
No, I paid. I'm leaving.
You're not walking out without showing it.
What's going on there? Refusing a receipt check isn't theft. Check your register.
Just show the receipt and we're done.
I'm not required to.
What happened when a black FBI agent tried to leave an electronics store like any other customer, and a loss prevention worker decided a receipt check was something he could enforce with his body? The outcome surprised people for one reason. The cameras didn't just capture a messy misunderstanding. They captured choices that crossed legal lines. Quick question before the story rolls back. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you watch these stories because you care about accountability, evidence, and people standing firm without getting reckless, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This started at Apex Digital inside Pinecrest Commons in Tampa on a normal shopping day with normal foot traffic. Julian Cross came in for high-end electronics. He wasn't acting secretive. He wasn't rushing. He bought what he came for, paid at the register, and walked toward the exit holding a shopping bag like everyone else. At the doorway, Derek Harlan from Loss Prevention stepped into Julian's path and turned the exit into a checkpoint. He made it clear he wanted the receipt, and he framed it like Julian had to comply. Julian didn't argue in circles. He didn't perform for the crowd. He calmly refused and tried to continue out, the same way customers do when they don't want a receipt check. That's when Derek made the first move that mattered. He physically blocked the exit. Not by standing nearby, not by asking again. He positioned himself to stop Julian from leaving. The dynamic changed right there, from a store employee making a request to a store employee attempting to control someone's movement. Julian didn't swing, shove, or threaten. He tried to walk around Derek instead of through him. He stayed controlled, like someone who understood that the moment you get emotional, the story gets rewritten around you. Derek escalated anyway. Instead of doing the simple step that solves most of these situations, verifying the purchase, he went straight to calling police. And when he called, he didn't frame it as a receipt dispute or a customer refusing a voluntary check. He framed it like theft. That single decision shaped everything that happened next. Now the store entrance had bystanders slowing down. Some people kept walking, but enough stopped to pay attention because the situation looked wrong. A few said they had seen Julian pay. More than one person pulled out a phone and started recording because the body blocking at the exit didn't look like store policy. It looked like a detention. Derek held his position. Julian held his ground. The argument didn't turn into shouting. It turned into a standoff where one side acted like refusal itself was suspicious, and the other side acted like rights didn't disappear just because someone wore a loss prevention badge. Minutes later, a patrol unit arrived. The young officer, Evan Rourke, stepped in and immediately treated the refusal as the main problem, not the lack of verified facts. He focused on forcing compliance first, as if getting Julian to submit would retroactively justify the stop. Julian stayed calm and kept it simple. He communicated that he had purchased the items and was trying to leave. He did not run. He did not hide the bag. He did not act like someone avoiding attention. And even with witnesses nearby saying they saw the purchase, Evan's attention stayed locked on one point. Julian had refused. That's where this shifted from an uncomfortable store confrontation into something that could get people fired, sued, and investigated. Because once a police officer treats a person's refusal as guilt, the officer starts building reasons after the fact. And the phones kept recording. Evan Rourke didn't start by checking the register. He didn't ask a manager to pull the transaction. He didn't separate the facts from Derek's accusation. He started with control. He positioned himself close enough that Julian had to either step back or stand still. Evan kept treating the situation like a refusal problem, not an evidence problem. He pushed the idea that Julian needed to comply first, and that everything else could be sorted out later. That's a common move when an officer thinks compliance is the same thing as legality. Julian stayed calm. He didn't raise his hands dramatically. He didn't give the crowd a performance. He kept his posture steady and tried to hold the boundary. He had paid, he was leaving, and he wasn't required to hand over paperwork because someone demanded it. Meanwhile, Derek played his part like he had already committed to the story. He didn't walk over to the register to verify anything. He didn't tell Evan he might be mistaken. He stood there like he needed the police to force the outcome he couldn't legally force himself. Bystanders kept filming. A couple people spoke up and said they saw Julian pay. Evan didn't take that as a reason to slow down. He took it as noise. He repeated demands. He kept stepping into Julian's space. And when Julian didn't give him what he wanted, Evan moved from verbal pressure to physical control. He grabbed Julian. Not because Julian attacked anyone, not because Julian tried to run. Evan grabbed him because Evan wanted the situation to end with compliance, and Julian wasn't giving it. Evan pushed Julian back against the entrance glass and put him in handcuffs. While he did it, he kept talking loudly, adding labels to the moment in real time. He used words like obstruction and resisting to build a justification over the sound of the cuffs, even though Julian wasn't fighting and wasn't fleeing. That part mattered for a reason people don't always catch. When officers speak those labels out loud during an arrest, they're often creating the language that ends up in the report. They're trying to make the audience hear the conclusion before anyone checks the facts. Phones captured it from different angles. You could see Julian's controlled body language. You could see Evan's escalation. And you could see Derek standing near the doorway, like the arrest confirmed he'd been right all along. After the cuffs went on, Evan treated the shopping bag like evidence. He took it, secured it, and acted like he had just interrupted a theft in progress, even though the purchase still hadn't been verified. Then Evan transported Julian to the precinct. That ride wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic. It was procedural. A person got handcuffed and processed based on a claim that wasn't checked because the officer treated refusal as the crime. At the station, Evan walked Julian into booking and started presenting the incident like a simple case. Suspect refused commands. Suspect obstructed. Suspect resisted. Suspected theft. That story would have held up if nobody asked basic questions. But the booking supervisor that night, Marisol Alvarez, did ask. She didn't start with attitude. She started with the legal basis. She wanted the exact reason for the detention, the exact facts of the theft allegation, and the exact steps Evan took to confirm anything before putting someone in cuffs. Evan gave his version, and Marisol kept narrowing it down. What did Derek actually see? Was there concealment? Was there an alarm? Was there a register check? Did anyone confirm the purchase? And the more she asked, the more it became clear the foundation was thin. Then she checked Julian's identification. That's when the temperature changed instantly. Julian wasn't just another guy in a holding area. He was FBI. Marisol didn't treat that as a reason to protect Evan. She treated it as a reason to protect the integrity of the department before it got crushed by evidence. She ordered the handcuffs removed immediately. And she initiated preservation steps on the spot. Bodycam footage, dispatch audio, and any store video that could be obtained, because she understood something Evan didn't. Once the footage exists, you don't get to rewrite what happened. Marisol Alvarez didn't treat the FBI ID like a get-out-of-jail card. She treated it like a risk signal. If the stop was weak, and if force was used to cover the weakness, the department was about to get exposed. She separated Julian from Evan's control immediately. She had the cuffs removed, logged the time, and made sure the property was handled correctly. Then she went back to Evan and did what should have happened at the store entrance. She demanded a clean timeline and actual theft facts. Evan kept leaning on refusal and non-compliance, as if that was the offense. Marisol didn't accept that as a legal basis. She asked who verified the purchase. She asked whether a manager confirmed a missing payment. She asked whether any alarm triggered. She asked whether anyone watched Julian conceal items or bypass a register. Evan didn't have those answers. At that point, Marisol moved into preservation mode. She flagged the incident for Bodycam retention, requested dispatch audio, and pushed for store video to be secured before it could go missing. She also documented Derek's role and the specific detail that mattered most. The store employee had blocked the exit before any theft confirmation existed. Then the watch commander, Connor Bennett, got pulled in. Bennett's first instinct was containment. He wanted it framed as a simple misunderstanding at a retail store. The kind of thing that gets smoothed over with a quiet release and a short note in the system. He tried to steer the conversation toward resolution without consequence. He focused on how quickly things could be cleared up if everyone stayed calm and didn't escalate it beyond the building. Julian didn't take the bait. He stayed composed, but he made his position clear through actions, not speeches. He requested the incident number. He requested the names and badge numbers involved. He asked for confirmation that all video sources were preserved. He asked what legal basis Evan had used to detain and handcuff him, and how that basis would be reflected in the report. He also made calls, not angry calls, structured calls, the kind of calls that trigger oversight automatically because they create a second record outside local control. He contacted his chain, and he made sure the department understood this wasn't a private inconvenience. It was a public accountability issue. Bennett tried to keep Julian inside the "we'll handle it internally" lane. Julian refused that framing. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't brag about his job. He didn't ask for special treatment. He pushed for the same thing any person should get, but often doesn't. The truth recorded accurately, the evidence preserved, and the process reviewed by people who weren't involved. That decision forced the department to shift gears. Because once evidence holds, the story can't be adjusted to fit the report. Before the night shift even ended, word started spreading in small ways. A bystander posted a clip showing the handcuffing. Another post showed Derek blocking the exit. Another showed Evan pushing the situation from "check the receipt" to "arrest." The angles didn't match each other perfectly, which made them more believable, not less. By morning, it was viral. Multiple clips, multiple witnesses, multiple timestamps. People could see Julian's body language. They could see that he wasn't fighting or running. They could hear Evan adding labels while applying cuffs. They could see the shopping bag being treated like evidence, even though no one had verified a theft. That's when the department lost the option to control the narrative. Any statement that leaned too hard on suspected theft or resisted would be compared directly to video. And video doesn't care about pride, rank, or traditions. Internal affairs got involved fast, not because the department suddenly became brave, but because the case had an obvious failure point. There were clear questions about probable cause and unnecessary force, and the public already had the receipts in the form of footage. Evan was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. That wasn't a conclusion, it was a pressure release valve. The department needed time because the video created exposure on multiple fronts: wrongful detention, excessive force, and report accuracy. And the spotlight didn't stop at the badge. People started asking why a store employee thought he could block an exit. They asked what Apex Digital trained loss prevention to do. They asked whether this was routine and just rarely filmed. They asked why police were being called as an enforcement tool before anyone verified a purchase. Apex Digital Corporate went into damage control. They signaled that they would review policies, but the video had already shown the main issue. This wasn't a receipt check. It was a physical detention by a private employee, followed by a police response that treated refusal as a crime. City risk management started moving behind the scenes. When there is clear footage and multiple witnesses, the question stops being whether the city will pay. The question becomes how much and what policy changes they must agree to so the same thing doesn't happen again next week. The early discussions focused on concrete standards, not vague promises. Refusing to show a receipt was clarified as not being probable cause by itself. Officers were pushed to verify alleged theft through available means before escalating, especially when the person is calm and still on scene. Detentions and handcuffing required specific articulable facts tied to an actual offense, not generalized non-compliance. Supervisors were required to match reports to camera evidence, not the other way around. Store-facing guidance tightened. Loss prevention blocking exits would be treated as a major red flag, requiring supervisor involvement and careful legal review. And Julian kept doing the same thing he did at the doorway. He stayed calm, stayed factual, and refused to let the system downgrade what happened into a minor misunderstanding. Because it wasn't minor, it was a chain of decisions. Internal affairs ended up with a simple problem and an ugly answer. The theft claim could not be supported once the register record and store video were reviewed, and the detention had been built around forcing compliance instead of confirming facts. Evan Rourke's body cam and the bystander recordings showed the same pattern from different angles. He treated refusal like guilt, closed distance, used physical control, and then tried to justify it by layering labels like obstruction and resisting even though Julian Cross stayed on scene and did not fight or run. With the footage locked in, the department couldn't rely on a report-driven narrative because the cameras showed what happened in order. The store did not escape the fallout. Apex Digital's loss prevention practices became part of the story because Derek Harlan didn't just ask for a receipt. He blocked the exit before verifying anything, and then called police describing theft without first confirming a missing payment. Corporate had to answer why employees were being trained to use their bodies to stop customers, and why police were treated like an enforcement shortcut instead of a last step after basic verification. Derek became a liability fast, and the store faced pressure to change policies that blurred the line between a request and a detention. Once the incident went viral from multiple angles, the city's response shifted from defending the officer to limiting damage. Settlement talks started because the risk was obvious. Witnesses, clear video, no verified theft, and a detention that escalated into handcuffs anyway. The policy changes that followed were the kind departments write when cameras make denial impossible. Refusing a receipt check was clarified as not creating probable cause by itself. Officers were pushed to verify theft claims through available means before escalating, and handcuffing standards were tightened so non-compliance alone could not be used as a shortcut to control. Supervisors were also put on notice that reports had to match video evidence, not the other way around. Julian treated the outcome as accountability, not personal revenge. He focused on documentation, chain of custody, and oversight, because those are the only tools that work when someone tries to turn a boundary into a crime. He also made sure the lesson didn't stay inside the building. The public saw how quickly a routine moment can become an arrest when authority gets offended, and they saw how evidence preservation and outside scrutiny forced the system to correct itself. Now it's on you. If you were a bystander in that entrance, would you have filmed, spoken up, or stayed out of it? And if you were the customer, Would you have complied just to avoid escalation or held the line like Julian did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who thinks receipt refusal equals guilt. And subscribe if you want more stories where the truth wins, because the cameras and the paper trail don't lie.